In this video, we will be exploring and explaining some wild Dexter theories, some behind-the-scenes facts, trivia, interesting bonus media in the Dexterverse, also some interesting differences and similarities between the Dexter TV series, between the books, and some predictions for what's to come in the future Dexter series, like, for example, in Dexter Resurrection. This iceberg and video is filled with a ton of stuff that even I, as a die-hard Dexter fan, didn't know. So if you like Dexter and you are into that sort of thing, you are absolutely in for a treat. Grab a drink. My choice today is a tankard of water, and join me as we explore the ultimate Dexter iceberg. Tier 1, Dexter the books. So just as a preface, the tier 1 on this iceberg is very short, as it's just kind of the stuff that most people would know. We'll very quickly get into the more interesting stuff, but perhaps a few of you didn't know that the Dexter TV series was actually based on a book series by the same name. And I've actually got the book series here. I might be missing one, but it's a very good book series if you haven't picked it up already. I personally watched the series first and then read the books, but what's super cool about this book series is that the TV series only really follows the storyline of the first book, and even within the first book, over the first season of Dexter, things are a little bit different. So you get kind of the same plot, the same storyline in the first book of Dexter, but then the second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one, they all have like different characters that come in and out. So it's not like something like Harry Potter where you're just getting a more detailed version of the films. It's like with this, you're getting like extra seasons of Dexter in a way. So yeah, as I said, if you like reading, definitely go check the book series out. Harry's code. So pretty basic one, this one. Everyone pretty much knows that Dexter has a code that he follows, and this code was created and given to him by his stepfather, Harry. And this code is basically to keep Dexter moral, to keep him out of prison, and to keep innocents from being killed. So there are 12 rules in it, just like the 12 days of Christmas. And the rules are: 1, don't get caught, which is pretty obvious. 2, never kill an innocent. 3, targets must be killers who have evaded the justice system. 4, killing must serve a purpose, otherwise it's just plain murder. 5, blend in socially to maintain appearances. 6, fake emotions and normality. 7, control urges to kill and channel them. 8, be prepared, leave no trace or evidence. 9, never make a scene, stay calm and collected. 10, don't make things personal because it clouds judgment. 11, don't get emotionally involved. And 12, no preemptive killing. Now, as you might know if you have seen the series, these rules aren't always kept or followed, but they are at least the basis for how Dexter acts in general. Dexter is autistic. Now, this theory, and it is a fan theory, it's never really touched on in the TV series, or actually in the books for that matter, but this theory kind of gets mixed opinions from people online. You know, people saying, how dare you call Dexter autistic? It's a terrible diagnosis. You have no idea what you're talking about. He's a serial killer. He's not autistic. And I've honestly seen very good arguments for both sides of this. I think one of the major problems people have with this is that they don't want autistic people to be associated with serial killers. And like, just because Dexter has no emotions, then all of a sudden he's autistic. But the arguments that I've seen for Dexter being autistic go a lot deeper than that. And most of the question behind this comes from, I think, the writers not fully exploring Dexter. Like, the descriptions for Dexter and the TV show are kind of all over the place. They describe, and Dexter even describes himself as stuff like a monster, as a sociopath, as having like no emotions, which a sociopath technically does have emotions, but has trouble understanding other people's emotions. You know, they sometimes lack empathy, but they do have emotions of their own. And meanwhile, psychopaths typically have no emotion, or they're not able to physically feel love, guilt, and so it's like, which one is it? Is he a monster? Is he a psychopath so he can't feel any emotions? And this is actually something he tells the audience at the start, saying he can't feel love, but then later on in the series he eventually does develop love. He clearly has the ability to feel stuff like guilt, jealousy, anger, and so it doesn't seem like he's a psychopath at all, and it doesn't really seem like he's a sociopath, as a few more traits of sociopaths tend to be they have trouble holding down jobs. They tend to have like these bursts of emotion. Sometimes it's anger, sometimes it's passion, and Dexter doesn't really fit into any of that. He is very diligent. He's held down a job for at least like 20 years. He's quite calm. He doesn't really seem to have these, fits of rage, and so it's like, definitely not psychopath, probably not sociopath. You know, you can think more along the lines of someone like Sherlock for a sociopath, where he does have emotions, he does have trouble understanding other people's emotions, but he's also just super eccentric. He has these bursts of just passion and inspiration, and that's not really something Dexter does at all. So the internet, with all of this trying to diagnose him, came to a few conclusions, and one of them was that Dexter was autistic. Now, I think the full diagnosis was something like PTSD with autism. You know, if he's got high function in autism, might explain why he's quite compulsive, he's quite meticulous with things, he likes things being in order. And while some autistic people, you know, get hooked on one thing, be it trains or stamps, Dexter's one thing that he gets hooked on could be something like blood. Hence why he gets so, you know, giddy and excited about it. So that could partly explain his kind of awkwardness side. And then the obsession with killing could come from something like PTSD. And what often happens with PTSD is people take the thing that originally hurt them and they either repeat it themselves or they reenact it either on themselves or on someone else, and this is in order to get kind of control over it. So it's like you're taking the thing that hurt you and you're replicating it, but under your control and under your rules. So he's traumatized from all of the blood and the body parts, etc., and he replicates it in order to, you know, control it. There's a great post and breakdown on this which I will leave in the description down below. And yes, no one's saying that all autistic people or even most autistic people are psychopaths, but autism combined with PTSD perhaps might explain why Dexter is the way he is. M99 is the substance that Dexter used to comically knock out and render unconscious basically all of his victims. And there was actually a major plot hole in Dexter New Blood, where Dexter uses another commonly known substance, which I won't say the name of, but it starts with a K, and he uses this on one of his victims. Then Angela, his girlfriend, finds this substance in the victim system, and she searches on Google Miami Metro, and then the name of this substance, and then bam, all these articles about the Bay Harbor Butcher come up, which leads to more investigations into Dexter, except that M99 is completely not the same substance as this other one. Like, one is used by people to just kind of chill out often, and the other is a literal elephant tranquilizer. So any Google search of Miami Metro and then this substance wouldn't have turned up the Bay Harbor Butcher because it wasn't even close to the same substance that Dexter originally used. Tier 2, Harry is a villain. So this is the theory or opinion that Dexter's foster father Harry was actually the villain in the series. Like, not intentionally. It's not like he murdered anyone or anything, but he kind of indirectly caused Dexter's mother to be killed because he convinced her to become an informant. He started using her for information, and then she was killed by the cartel. And then when his mother dies and when Harry rescues Dexter, he discovers that he's, you know, a little bit messed up. And so instead of getting him help, like, he does try to get him help a little bit, but instead of really sticking to that, he's like, oh, let me just train him to be a serial killer. You know, if you remember the rules that we read from above, they're like, fake all your emotions, never become attached to anyone, basically saying you're a crazy serial killer, psychopath, emotionless monster, and that is what you are, and you will never change. And so it's no wonder why Dexter, at the start of the series, kind of has all these beliefs that he's developed over many, many years. You know, I'm an emotionless robot, I can't feel love or compassion or anything, because his foster father had been telling him that for like 20 years. But no, he tries to get him help for a little bit, and then he's like, oh, that didn't work, I guess. The next most obvious thing is to train you to be a serial killer. You know, you're just an emotionless stone golem with a Floridian tan and a rugged jawline. And then, after all of this, as if that wasn't bad enough, after training Dexter and making him into the perfect serial killer, he then just leaves both Dexter and Deb, and they have to do the rest of the growing up, surviving, etc. on their own. So yeah, definitely not the best of fathers, probably not even the best of characters morally in the story, which might potentially class him as a villain. Dexter the Games refers to, well, all of the games released about Dexter. Some of them have some pretty goofy PlayStation 1 level graphics, which just make them even more hilarious, and I'm not able to link a direct link to the games, unfortunately, but if you really want them, if you search for them, you can always find them. And in the games, you can stalk, you can investigate, you can do Dexter things, and it honestly all looks quite fun. Elliot search engine. So this refers to the search engine that hacker mastermind Lewis showed Dexter in the TV series, and it actually exists in real life. You can go head over to elliotssearchengine.org and check it out for yourself. And there were actually a bunch of theories that Lewis himself had made this search engine and was using it to track Dexter with, because he basically says to Dexter like, oh, you can't use that search engine. Here, use Elliot. It's a super secure algorithmic one. But we later see Lewis's computer and we see that he's not using Elliot, but he's using one called Net Wrangler. So there were some theories that were saying that, yeah, it can't be that great because he himself is not using it. So there's something underhand going here. But yeah, Elliot search engine. Dexter kill count. So this is something we don't exactly know. Like, different seasons have said slightly different things, slightly different numbers, but we can estimate roughly that Dexter, especially in like the later seasons, kills probably between 1 and 2 people a month on average. And he's been doing it for give or take 20 years in the original series. And in New Blood, he says that he has killed hundreds, which is probably at least 200. We have a total of 149 kills confirmed, which is either kills that we have seen ourselves in the series or kills that he has directly mentioned. So anywhere between probably 190 and like 300 is probably correct. Probably closer to the low 200s, which is an absolute ton of kills, but only the second highest for a killer in the entire series. And the first highest is someone we will cover a little bit further down. Dexter the Comics. So this refers to the 5-issue comic book series, which is actually canon, by the way, and it was written by the original Dexter author, Jeff Lindsay, and it was actually published by Marvel Comics. So Dexter in the next Avengers film? I mean, we can dream, can't we? But yeah, these are just some extra cool storylines, some extra plots to kind of further delve deep into the world of Dexter. And after this, there was another comic book series called Dexter Down Under, in which, as you can imagine, he goes to Australia and takes out some of the bad guys, as he always does. As I said, it's all great stuff. If you love Dexter, you want some, extra plots, a few extra helpings of Dexter, and I am always a big fan of comics. They're a fantastic media to consume a lot of stuff really quickly, and yeah, go and check them out. Dex and Deb act as married. So this one is quite commonly known, I think, but Michael C. Hall, who plays Dexter, and Jennifer Carpenter, who plays Deb, actually fell in love during the filming of Dexter and ended up getting married. It only lasted for 2 years before they got a divorce, but thankfully they were able to work together. They stayed friends throughout it. They're apparently still in touch and still good friends even to this day, and it might be a bit strange with the context of their characters, but actors always seem to fall in love during the filming of these, so I mean, what are you gonna do? Alt ending execution table. So this was an idea from the original showrunners, who thought that this was potentially one way that the series could end, and that was with Dexter being caught, him being charged for his crimes, sentenced to death, and then being executed on a table with, like a lethal injection, kind of mimicking in a slight way how he killed his victims, with him being on the table instead of the person he's killing. Obviously minus all the bondage and shrink wrap and stuff. But that was one idea. And a little aside on that idea was that what if, as he's lying there, as he's dying, he looks to the side, for the people watching in through the window, and there he sees everyone he's ever killed, or at least the most important people, because fitting 200 people into that room might be a little bit difficult, which I think would be kind of an interesting way to end it, maybe. I don't like the idea of killing off Dexter, but another idea about it was that what if all of these series that we watched, every single season, what if all of that was just a flashback in the mind of Dexter? Which, I mean, that probably would have been a terrible ending, because how can we get flashbacks of scenes that he wasn't even in? But obviously none of that ever happened, and we were left with obviously the ending that we got, no matter how bad it was, and we never did get to see Dexter on an execution table. At least not yet. Plastic wraps / plastic bags. So this is not so much a theory that I read, as much as it is more like an observation, and that is that Dexter buys and stores so much plastic. Honestly, where does he hide or store it all? If you imagine just for one kill, you've got to fill the entire room up with this plastic wrap, and if he's doing these 2 a month, so he's doing 1 every 2 weeks, he needs enough plastic sheets to fully cover an entire room and have a table of sorts, fully cover that, and then put the person on it, wrap them in this cellophane wrap, and then it's like, okay, fine, whatever, that's a lot of plastic. And then he's gotta get the body, put it into plastic bags, get all of this plastic from the entire room, fold it up, with all the stuff in it, all the evidence. Like, how many plastic bags would that fill? You're probably looking at 3 to 5 for the body, and maybe another 3 to 6, 7, 8 with the plastic. So you've probably got at least at a bare minimum like 10 plastic bags completely full, and you've got all the rolls of plastic, etc. And it's like, where does he store this? In his apartment? No. On his boat? Obviously not. In Rita's house? Hell no. So does he have like a secret warehouse or something that is just filled with plastic? And he would probably need to buy it in bulk to an extent, as just buying it, one at a time in different stores and stuff, that'd be very suspicious. So yeah, a very strange thing that I think is never mentioned in the series. And let me know your either favorite theories or thoughts on this one down below. Original showrunner. So this is just a nod to the fact that the original showrunner, Clyde Phillips, actually left after season 4, which is the season that a lot of people believed the show started to go downhill. You had season 1, classic. You had season 2, which a lot of people believed was actually better than season 1. Then you had season 3, which we won't talk about. Then you have season 4, which is the Trinity Killer, which is like some of the best television in history. So yeah, 3 out of 4 isn't bad. And then you have every other season after that, which we won't even touch on. And after Clyde left in season 4, the head writer for Dexter, Melissa Rosenberg, also left. And she left Dexter to go write for Twilight, of all things. But whether it was down to Clyde leaving or Melissa leaving, clearly the show started to get worse from there. And that's kind of sad, because we could have possibly got 4 more amazing seasons. But sensibly, they brought Clyde Phillips back for Original Sin and for New Blood and for Dexter Resurrection. So they definitely had some sense. Dr. Morgan refers to the fact that I think a lot of people forget that Dexter is kind of a doctor. Like, yes, he can't technically practice. There's evidence to say that he didn't complete med school, and so he didn't get his doctorate. But, he at least went to school as a doctor or in medicine, which probably helped him with the whole, dismembering bodies. But a lot of the early med school stuff, he probably still remembers. How to treat a wound, how to diagnose people. And I think they retconned this in Original Sin, where they had Dexter join the police force in his 20s. But in the original series, Doak says that Dexter was top of his class in med school, which you normally need to be a little bit older than 20 to be in med school, but either way, top of his class in med school. Even if he didn't graduate, I think we can unofficially, if not a bit jokingly, call him Dr. Dexter, which it's got kind of a nice ring to it. Light versus dark clothes. So this is just a reference to, and it's quite obvious if you say it out loud, but in the nighttime when Dexter is doing all his stalking and all of his killing, he tends to wear dark grays, black, or his typical kill shirt, which I think is like a dark greenish. And obviously this is so that, he's not seen as easily, which absolutely makes complete sense. But when he's walking around in the daytime, if you notice, he's often got like really bright clothing, bright pinks, oranges, blues, and I think this is kind of subtly a reflection of who Dexter is in that moment. So when he's doing his stalking and killing at night, that's like the monster side of Dexter, and so it's reflected in these dark, kind of dull, boring colors. And then when he's out and about, when he's at his day job, when he's, in the daytime talking to people, he's wearing these overly bright, kind of colorful tops, representing, I think, Dexter, putting on a face, hiding in plain sight, as a way to make people think like, Dexter, a serial killer? No, he's always wearing these happy, super colorful tops. There's no way he can be. And so yeah, simple detail, quite an obvious one, I think, but it is quite fun to watch through Dexter and keep an eye out for all of his super colorful, bright shirts. Dexter the movie. So when this one, the first Dexter book, was written, it was basically a massive hit, and producers immediately wanted to make it into some form of media. And originally they wanted to make it into a film, but they said that it would likely have to be classed as like like a horror or thriller sort of film, and they thought this would affect the funding of the film, affect kind of the style of it, where they couldn't really do the whole kind of Dexter vibe. It would need to be a bit more gory and, jump scary. So they eventually just decided to go with a TV series instead of a film, and the rest is history. Unless 8 seasons in a movie, or 10, 11, 12, 13 series with all these spin-offs and a movie, but we shall see. Bret Easton Ellis references. So throughout the series, Dexter, and more so the writers, have made references to Bret Easton Ellis and his characters. And this is with names like Sean Ellis being obviously a reference to Ellis, and with Patrick Bateman being one of Dexter's aliases, and this being a direct reference to Patrick Bateman from the American Psycho film, which was obviously written by Ellis. Jeff Lindsay hated Michael C. Hall. And I say hated, he didn't really hate him. He had hardly met the guy at first, he didn't even know him, but he had seen the actor play a role in a TV series called 6 Feet Under, and he said that Michael C. Hall would be terrible for the role of Dexter. Like, he wasn't convinced that he could play this, serial killer. A bit awkward in the daytime, and then strong, scary, terrifying, mysterious at night. And according to the account, Michael came in, did a single line read, and then Jeff was like, yeah, this is absolutely the perfect guy for the role. And I honestly can't imagine anyone besides Michael C. Hall playing Dexter, so it was definitely the perfect fit. California refers to the fact that most of these scenes recorded or filmed in Dexter were actually filmed in California. Like this one, yep. California, 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 California. Pretty much all of the indoor shots filmed in California. All of the outdoors or beach shots were filmed in Long Beach, California. And just a few of the kind of establishing shots or the nightlife shots or the skyline shots of Miami, those were actually filmed in Miami. But they just sent a separate crew down there. They did all the filming kind of without the actors, got all of the B-roll footage. And yeah, sorry to ruin the illusion, but you're basically just watching a California TV series. Dexter, the name. So the name Dexter was specifically chosen because it means the right or right-handed, and this is in Latin, and in older times, the right side of the shield, this was actually called the Dexter, and the left side of the shield was called the Sinister. So the idea was that the real Dexter, if you take away his name, just this real individual, what he really was the sinister side, but how he appeared to everyone else was the Dexter side. So he appears more normal, more sane as, Dexter, but he is secretly hiding this dark, sinister side. And it's some pretty cool wordplay, some pretty cool writing or character design by Jeff Lindsay. And I like the name Dexter anyway, so it's kind of a win-win. Just imagine him being called like Jim or Jake or Kyle or something. Yeah, madness. D. Morgan. So we covered Dexter's first name, obviously being Dexter, but his last name Morgan refers to the De Morgan laws, named after Augustus D. Morgan. And these laws more or less, I'm kind of summarizing it here, but they more or less explain how kind of opposite things can kind of balance out each other and equal the same thing. For example, if you apply for 2 jobs, the odds of you not getting either job is the same as the odds that you do not get the first job and you do not get the second job. But enough of this complex logic. This was once again just some clever naming by Jeff Lindsay, where you have Dexter Morgan and you have Deborah Morgan. So they're both D. Morgan in a way, and they were supposed to be these opposite characters. Deb is quite moral, she's quite outspoken, she likes dancing, kind of socializing, she's quite loud. And then Dexter, secretly a serial killer, but on the surface quite quiet, quite calm, kind of awkward and not social. And the idea was they kind of complete each other, they come together, they equal the same thing in that when they're a union, they're kind of one. And yeah, so once again, some pretty clever naming. And as I said, I absolutely love things like this. Tier 3, Trinity kill count. So we mentioned Dexter as having a pretty high kill count, somewhere in the kind of 200s range, with like 149 of these being confirmed, but the Trinity killer has 279 confirmed kills, meaning he could possibly be up towards the 300 plus range. You know, perhaps a few extra kills that Lundy didn't detect over the years, which 300 is just like an insane number of kills, and it puts him way up there in terms of some of the most kills of any serial killer ever, not just in the series but in real life as well. And just while researching this, there was one guy called the Beast who was a serial killer in South America, and he killed potentially up to 300 victims, and he was sentenced for these crimes to 1,853 years in prison. But he ended up getting it reduced to just 22 years because he agreed to show the police to some of the bodies, which that is a massive reduction in sentencing. But yeah, I don't think in the show we get the big picture of Trinity and just how insanely prolific he was over the years. Trinity Killer in season 1. So this is an interesting Easter egg that was most likely not intended, and it took place in season 1 when Dexter and Rita are watching this film, Tears of Endearment, in which John Lithgow plays a role, which sets up this strange situation where John Lithgow exists as an actor in Dexter, but also is a real person as Arthur Mitchell as the Trinity Killer. Unless the in-universe explanation for this is that Arthur Mitchell was actually an actor. Like in his early life, he was an actor, he made the Tears of Endearment, and this was while he was serial killing, and then he left acting, went on to do, you know, what he did, start a family, while keeping up all of the serial killing. I mean, probably not, but it is still a fun little Easter egg. Lily and Morgan. And this is a tiny spoiler for the books in case you would like to read them, so skip ahead now. But in the books, Dexter never actually had a son. He instead had a daughter, and the daughter was named Lily Ann Morgan. And it was partly Dexter's view of his daughter Lily, and you know, all of her innocence that he wanted to protect, that he wanted to connect with, that helped him kind of evolve from this mindset he had of himself, of this heartless stone golem killer, into lovable, cuddly Dexter. Jeremy Renner. So Hawkeye was actually considered for the role of Dexter, and as I said, I can't imagine anyone besides Michael C. Hall playing Dexter, but yeah, he was kind of put forward for the role, but he didn't want to play another serial killer so soon after playing Jeffrey Dahmer, which I mean, it's probably understandable. But yeah, thank God he said no, and we ended up getting Michael C. Hall. Moral dilemmas. So this is a reference to some of the many moral dilemmas that are presented to Dexter over the series. And Dave Scripted did a great video on this, which I will link down below. But it is just a very interesting plot detail to think about and to consider as you're watching through it. So, spoilers for season 2 of Dexter. And if you haven't watched season 2 already, shame on you. But when Dokes finds out that Dexter is the Bay Harbor Butcher, suddenly Dexter is faced with a moral dilemma. You know, according to his code, he can't get caught, but he also can't kill an innocent. And as far as the code is concerned, Dokes is an innocent at this point. So it's like, he's kind of stuck. He's in a very interesting position, which would be fantastic to see, you know, kind of worked through, where Dexter can't really kill Dokes. He also can't let him free and go to prison himself, because that would break his #1 rule. So it's like, what does he do? He's left with the choice of like killing Dokes and then having to deal with the guilt of killing an innocent person, of breaking his own code. Maybe that starts to, you know, kind of crack his illusion that this code is perfect, that he's a perfect serial killer, if he's just willing to kill anyone who gets in his way anyway. You know, if you bend the rules enough, they're not even rules anymore. They're just bent things. Or does he release Dokes and possibly have to stand trial himself, in which case, does he get away? Is there enough evidence against him? Does he end up going to prison? It seems like a pretty big risk to take. Or does he release Dokes but then try and frame him, which again might be a bit dangerous? Or does he run away? Does he give up this kind of local life that he's made for himself? You know, it's like there's no really good solution or good answer, which is partly what makes an interesting dilemma. And it might have been interesting to see Dexter have to kill Dokes and then, you know, struggle with that internally. But instead you had mind and my tits Lila come in and just basically kill Dokes, and then Dokes ends up getting framed as the Bay Harbor Butcher, which basically just throws the entire dilemma away. He also never needs to risk getting caught. He doesn't get convicted of this or suspected of it because everyone is convinced that Dokes was actually the Bay Harbor Butcher, and since he's dead, he can't defend himself. So it's like you set up this huge moral dilemma and then everything just gets fixed instantly. And kind of the same thing happens in a later season. Again, spoilers for like season 7, I think, or maybe 6. But yeah, this time La Guerta finds out he's the killer. She has the evidence against him. She's looking to frame him, and he's kind of left with the same choice. Does he kill Maria, a complete innocent, and then have to deal with that, guilt internally? Or does he risk getting caught? Same dilemma, but then once again, Deb comes in and saves the day. She kills Maria. Dex doesn't need to kill Maria, doesn't need to break his code, doesn't need to risk getting caught. And yeah, it's kind of a sad waste of a moral dilemma. It could have resulted in some fantastic scenes, some fantastic plot lines, a missed opportunity, probably, but it is what it is. Real life Trinity Killer. So the Trinity Killer, Arthur Mitchell, is very likely based on this man, and this was Dennis Rader, or the BTK Killer, which stands for horrifically the Bind, Torture, Kill Killer, who, just like Arthur, was seemingly an upstanding man. He was a family man, a community man, the nicest guy you'd ever meet, except he was actually a serial killer in much the same way that Trinity was. Now, granted, he didn't kill nearly as many people as the Trinity Killer, but just this idea of someone being, a community man, a loving family man, and on the side being a serial killer is very likely inspired by the BTK Killer. Real life Runaway Killer. So the Runaway Killer who we see in Dexter New Blood was again likely based on a real life killer, that being Robert Hansen, otherwise known as the Butcher Baker Killer. And this guy was an absolute piece of work. He operated mainly in Alaska, and he would abduct and assault these runaway girls, hitchhikers, homeless girls, adult workers, and then after he was done with them, he would release them into the wild and then hunt them with a rifle and with hunting knives. He was eventually arrested, charged, and convicted of these crimes and sentenced to 461 years in prison, but he didn't serve the whole term, as he died in 2014 from natural causes. Dexter the Spin-Offs refers to, obviously, the many spin-offs of the original Dexter series. So we have Dexter New Blood, we have Dexter Original Sin, which has just come out recently, and we also have Dexter Resurrection, which you can only imagine what happens in that series. And then we also have potentially a Trinity Killer prequel series, which is apparently soon to come. And there are, as you might know, kind of mixed reviews on this. Some people say they should have just ended it at the original series. Other people like myself can't get enough of Dexter, so anything more Dexter is just a good thing, unless it's absolutely terrible. But I don't think these extra series were too bad. But let me know your thoughts on them, if you loved them or hated them, or anything in between, down below. Socio is a term that Batista uses with Dexter quite a lot, and that's because Batista speaking Spanish, and in Spanish, socio kind of means like associate or friend, colleague sort of thing, so it kind of makes sense. But with the idea earlier of Dexter being a sociopath, it is kind of funny to see Batista like kind of calling him Socio, even though he didn't mean it like that, and it might just be a complete coincidence, or it might be another bit of this clever writing. Innocent victims refers to all of the innocent victims that Dexter has killed over the years, and these are ones that didn't necessarily fit his code. And it kind of depends how you define innocent victim as to how many there actually are. Like, is an innocent victim anyone who doesn't strictly meet Dexter's code, or is it just anyone who hasn't killed before? Does self-defense count? If someone tries to kill Dexter and he kills them back, is that an innocent victim? They don't strictly meet Dexter's code, but I don't see them as necessarily being innocent. But the numbers for this range from kind of the 10 to 20 range, depending on how you define these kills. So nobody's perfect, not even Dexter. Harry is Dexter's dark passenger is an interesting theory. And when we see Harry in the TV show, unless it's a flashback, we're never actually seeing Harry, because by the time the series starts, Harry's already dead. So most of the time we see Harry is in the form of kind of Ghost Harry, or, you know, Dexter's imagination Harry. And it's not really Harry when you think about it. Like, the stuff that Ghost Harry says, the decisions he seems to make, aren't really the way original Harry thought. Like, if you're taking a more literal interpretation of this, it's more how Dexter sees Harry. But what if all of these visions of Harry are actually just Dexter's dark passenger personified? Like, what if this voice that he's always hearing in his head, what if we just see that as Harry? So when he says, like, Dexter, you shouldn't be doing this, and I know, fantastic Harry impression, but what if that's actually his dark passenger speaking, but we just see it portrayed as Harry? And I know this theory doesn't fully line up with what Dexter says the dark passenger tells him, or how the dark passenger acts, but it is just, I think, a somewhat interesting perspective to view this on. Vogel was the brain surgeon. So in season 8, we hear about this killer called the brain surgeon, who goes around, kills people, cuts out a little piece of their brain, and this is all one big mystery until we find out that this man named Oliver Saxon is the brain surgeon. Except, what if he's not? And this theory says that it is actually someone called Evelyn Vogel, who was the psychiatrist, psychologist that partly wrote Harry's code. You know, she counseled Dexter when he was a kid, she talked to Harry about this, she worked with Harry to write, you know, Harry's code, and so she knows about Dexter being a serial killer. She gets like a hard-on for psychopaths, saying to Dexter, like, yes, you're the perfect psychopath, there's nothing wrong with people like that. And Saxon was actually a former patient of hers. So what if she saw Saxon as this perfect psychopath and she secretly kept working with him in order to perpetrate these killings? So what if Vogel was perhaps performing these surgeries? Or she was vetting them, killing them, capturing them, basically just a co-conspirator with Saxon, and then Saxon eventually gets caught, he doesn't really talk much, and then he ends up getting killed by Dexter. So what if she was in on it and we just never find out? Kind of an interesting take, I think, but potentially it might be a possibility. Batista actor's son on set. So the actor who plays Batista, David Zayas, he has a son named David Zayas Jr. who looks a hell of a lot like him. And there were a few occasions where when Batista was like in the background, his son would actually stand in for him. You know, if you take your son, you turn him around, you put a Hawaiian shirt on him and a fedora cap, very unlikely you're going to be able to tell the difference. So in at least a few of these scenes you see, especially in the later seasons, it is actually David's son playing the role and not David. And that brings us onto our next entry, because much in the same vein, Maria's actor Lauren Veleth has a twin sister, Lorraine Veleth, who on occasion also did step in for Lauren, you know, during the filming of some shots. Dexter is in a mental institution. So this is a theory that says that everything that happened in Dexter isn't real, that he's locked up in some mental home somewhere, and much like in Shutter Island, when that crazy lady thinks that like all of the nurses and all of the guards are various people in her life. You know, one nurse she sees as her friendly next door neighbor, one of the male nurses she sees as like the milkman. And so what if Dexter is actually in a mental home, completely insane, traumatized from what he experienced as a kid, and maybe Deb is just another mental patient in that home? Maybe Maria is like the head of the ward, Dokes is a security guard that really hates Dexter, and Dexter is just kind of piecing this whole illusion, this whole story in his head. And this, I think, is pretty cool, pretty interesting headcanon, only as long as it stays in the head, as I think if they actually came out with this as an actual ending or reveal in the show, it would be one of the worst plot twists, and I would probably never forgive them. But it is still fun to imagine. Upside down phone. So this is a reference to a few times, a few odd occasions, where Dexter seems to be holding a mobile phone. You know, he's using it, he's speaking into it, but he's holding it upside down. Now, I'm sure this has likely no deeper meaning than just them filming for like 12 hours at a time, and one of the scenes he just happens to pick it up upside down because, you know, when they're filming there's not actually another person on the other end, but it is still a fun little Easter egg. All in Dexter's head. So this is similar in ways to the mental home theory, except this theory says that Dexter could basically be anywhere and anyone, in that this is all just kind of the daydreaming of Dexter in any boring role. So for example, one theory is that the ending of Dexter, where, you know, he becomes a lumberjack, one fan theory was that he was actually always a lumberjack, and he was imagining having this cool life as a serial killer. You know, I work for the police, I keep bad guys off the street, I'm super smart, I know jujitsu, and this was all just the imaginings of Michael C. Hall being a lumberjack. And then when the series ends, it just kind of shows us reality, saying like, yeah, it was actually all in the head of this lumberjack here, which I think is a very fun and very interesting theory. Or, you know, he's not a lumberjack, maybe he's like an office clerk or a button rotator in a dry cleaners or something, some boring mundane role, and this is basically all just his internal fanfiction. Lundy knew. So this is a theory that says that FBI Special Agent Lundy from seasons 2 and 4 actually knew that Dexter was at least a serial killer, but maybe even the Bay Harbor butcher. And this is due to a whole range of evidences, honestly. One being how attentive and intelligent Lundy was. People were saying that there's no way that Dexter could have, you know, got through him. Another one was all of these seemingly strange, cryptic conversations he had with Dexter. You know, one where he says there's no excuse for killing, and then he says, well, actually, maybe there's one excuse, and that is to save an innocent life. And then they kind of look at each other in a weird way, where you can read into that saying like, okay, I know you're a serial killer, but I think you are indirectly saving innocent lives by taking these bad guys off the street, so I'm gonna kind of let you do your own thing. And then there's another conversation where he basically says, yeah, the Bay Harbor butcher is very neat, very meticulous, very careful, actually kind of like you, Dexter. And Dexter's like, yeah, I guess that's true. And then in his kind of interrogations of Dexter, he sees Dexter as this really intelligent, really responsible, really careful guy who made some apparent rookie blood mistakes, which allowed a few of these killers to go free. And these killers just so happened to be the ones that ended up dead. So from Lundy's perspective, he's thinking this guy's always careful, he's always diligent, he's like the best blood guy we have almost in the nation, and then he just happens to make these rookie mistakes. The killer ends up going free, but then always just ends up dead. Like, I think any half-intelligent person can, you know, connect the dots there, but I think Dexter was just suspicious all round as well. He also had his boat in the same marina that the killer did. Like, there's so many little bits of evidence pointing towards Dexter, and Lundy is supposed to be the best serial killer catcher in like the entire country, and it seems weird that he wouldn't pick up on these little clues about Dexter unless he did pick up on them and he actually knew the whole time. And it is kind of a strange theory. I think it does make complete sense, but also Lundy seems to be quite a moral, quite like a lawful good character, where Dexter is more like an unlawful good, or maybe an unlawful neutral, where Dexter's kind of doing good despite what the law says, and Lundy I don't think has that same personality. I don't think he would really let Dexter go even if he knew he was doing it for good, but some people believe he knew and he just left Dexter to his own devices. It would fill in a few plot holes, but it would also open up quite a few more. Oh, and one theory said that he actually did know and he was gonna turn Dexter in, but he decided to keep him around for a bit and to use his expertise as a serial killer and his, you know, skills, his detective skills, in order to catch the Trinity killer who Lundy was going after for years. Again, bit of a stretch that one, but it is something to think about. Quinn knew. Now this one there's a little more evidence for, and I think my personal opinion is that Quinn probably knew Dexter was, you know, hiding something, but he didn't know that he was necessarily the Bay Harbor butcher, but maybe like a substance lord, you know, like a Breaking Bad sort of individual, or, you know, a hitman or assassin or something, but not a mass murdering serial killer. And we know he at least had his suspicions during the series, and then does some detective work into Dexter. He hires Liddy to, you know, do some private eye sort of investigating, and then he has kind of a falling out with Deb about this, and he calls off the search from Liddy, but Liddy continues the search. He continues to get evidence on Dexter, and he gets some long-range photographs of Dexter near his boat and some secret hidden camera evidence of Dexter and Lumen, and then he calls up Quinn to meet him to, you know, present him with this evidence, but lo and behold, Dexter is captured. Dexter turns this round on Liddy, ends up killing him, and then it kind of comes out that Liddy was killed, his body was found, and I think Quinn starts to kind of add this all up in his head. You know, the guy that Liddy was just investigating was seemingly professionally wrestled and then stabbed to death. And all the evidence is seemingly cleared up. There's nothing actually pointing to Dexter. And in a few of the scenes after this, with Quinn talking with Dexter, Quinn seems very suspicious, but he kind of knows what's best for him. And Dexter more or less says in so many words that Liddy was probably investigating where he shouldn't. You know, he says that, oh, I heard Liddy was investigating some bad people, or sticking his nose where he shouldn't be, and that probably came up to bite him. But it's just the way it's acted, the way he says this, is basically him secretly saying to Quinn, yeah, he was investigating me, I had to take him out, and the same thing will happen to you if you ever try this. And I think Quinn more or less gets the message. It would, I think, actually fit Quinn's character quite a bit, because while he's not a completely dirty cop, he has shown that he can take bribes from criminals. He was stealing from a crime scene when we first met him, and so for him to keep his mouth shut on Dexter, who he has no evidence for, he was dating Dexter's sister, he had no real need or want to frame Dexter, to have a falling out with them. And even if he tries to go after Dexter again, probably before Quinn can actually get any evidence on him, he thinks that Dexter will just finish him the same way he did to Liddy. And Quinn probably knows that Dokes was accusing Dexter of being the Bay Harbor Butcher, and then he ended up dead. And then Maria was accusing him of being the Bay Harbor Butcher, and then she shortly after ended up dead. And I think he's smart enough to put all this together, but sensible enough never to come out with it. Matthews knew, and I promise there's not too many of these X knows entries, but this one was honestly quite fascinating to me. So at the start of the series, this is Captain Matthews, and he was a super close friend of Harry's, and he wasn't exactly your, by the book cop like Lundy was. You get the feeling from him that he's gonna follow the rules most of the time, but that, yeah, he can probably cut corners if he wants to. He's kind of in between Quinn and Lundy, I would say. But as I said, he was very close friends with Harry, and when Harry died, Harry basically told him to look after his children for him. So he was in ways kind of a godfather to Dexter and Deb, and this is partly why he kind of looked out for them throughout the series, promoted Deb into detective work from Vice. And there were two kind of pieces of main evidence for this theory. One being that it was possible that Harry had confided in Matthew about Dexter and about all the, therapy and counseling, and maybe even about Dexter's psychopathic tendencies, his murderous intent for animals, and so maybe Matthews knows more than he's letting on. And the other part of this was in some strange discussions that he had with Dexter, which honestly, if you watch the scenes, it's like they are super sus. It's like, how could Matthews not know? He's basically acting as if he does know. And in the TV series, they could have just made the actor act as if he didn't know, but it seems like they directed him to say like, okay, you definitely know about Dexter, but you're either scared of him or you're pretending not to know. And action.
You've known me my whole life. Do you think I'm the Bay Harbor Butcher? Of course not.
And in these same conversations, he ends up giving Dexter some vital information. He kind of tells Dexter what information, what evidence Maria has on him, which gives Dexter a heads up and allows him to more or less outsmart Maria. Camilla knew. So this is another person who was fairly close to Harry. She knew of Dexter having a brother, of that brother being the ice truck killer, and she told Harry she would completely destroy all the evidence of it, take the secret to her grave. But she later did ask Dexter to mercy kill her, which hints at maybe the knowledge that Dexter was capable of killing someone, as most people wouldn't be capable of doing something like that. And maybe she thought that since Brian was a serial killer, Dexter had kind of gone through the same thing as him, and this whole Bay Harbor Butcher thing is very convenient. So maybe she had her suspicions, maybe she actually factually knew. And for this one, I don't think it's impossible that Camilla knew, but she always seemed like such a sweet, kind of bubbly lady, and I don't think if she knew that Dexter was, slaying people twice a month, that she would act the same way towards him. So I'm not entirely sure for this one, but it is still a possibility. Rita actor originally auditioned for Deb. So Julie Benz, the actor who plays Rita, actually originally auditioned to play the role of Deb, which might seem strange if you're used to these two actors playing, the roles they actually ended up getting. But in the books, Deborah is actually described as being more like Julie Benz. She's this like blonde, well-endowed bombshell of a lady, which Julie Benz does seem to fit a more accurate physical description or role. But honestly, I think Jennifer Carpenter absolutely smashed the role, but I would love to see a Julie Benz Deborah. Batista actor was a cop. So the guy who plays Batista, David Zayas, was actually a cop before he was an actor, and he used to read lines with his partner as they were doing the rounds, as they were driving around in their squad car, which is a true story. Very interesting, and probably explains why he tends to play cops pretty well in some of the roles that he does. Blood recipe. So most of the blood that they use in the show is, shocker, not real blood. It's mostly a mixture of maple syrup, dish soap, and food coloring. And because as they were filming, they had this fake blood, everywhere, this sweet, sticky, syrupy blood, it tended to attract flies, mosquitoes, wasps, and so they added in some peppermint oil in order to repel these creatures. And yeah, fake blood. Except the blood slides. That blood was actually furniture dye. Dexter wasn't allowed to die. So this is partly a reference to an earlier entry, where the showrunners had maybe some idea of how Dexter would end, being executed on a table. But when they came forward with this, the producers and the TV network, Showtime, said that he wasn't allowed to die. And this was to allow them, some breathing room for maybe bringing Dexter back in subsequent seasons, in subsequent spin-offs as they did. And yeah, this means he had plot armor basically the entire series, which might explain why he got away with some of the things he did. Michael C. Hall's favorite kill was Little Chino. This is just a little bit of trivia, but Michael's favorite Dexter kill, he said, was Little Chino, just because of the size of that guy, and like Dexter, this much smaller guy, having to wrestle him, take him down, and then, when he escaped from the table, he said that was quite an interesting dynamic. And also, he really liked the whole Trinity season, and the Trinity kill, and also the kills that Dexter got on the people who killed his mother, which all makes sense. But let me know your favorite kill down below. That sounds very concerning. Let me know your favorite fake, completely made up kill on the TV show Dexter that is absolutely not real in any way. 24 hours. So you might not have known this, but 24 hours is actually the amount of hours in a single day. Yeah. Crazy. In tier 4, we have no, I'm only kidding, but this is just basically an observation that says within a 24-hour day, Dexter really does get a hell of a lot done. Firstly, he sleeps for probably at least 6 to 8 hours. He has a full-time job on the weekdays. He seems to do a fair amount of working out, and then he's hanging out and spending quality time with Rita and the kids. He's hanging out with Deb, and of course he's got to do all the mundane stuff like grocery shopping, like doing his laundry, like cooking 3 meals a day, that huge bloody breakfast that he seems to have in the opening credits. And then he goes fishing from time to time, he's out on his boat, and then there's the driving from place to place, the commute time, and then researching killers, stalking them, because he has to be absolutely sure that they are guilty. So research them, gather the evidence, stalk them, find a time when they're free to be kidnapped. Well, not like anyone's free, but like you need to wait the perfect time. You can't just kidnap them whenever. And then before all this, before you kidnap them, you have to go to some remote location, set up a kill room, wrap everything in plastic, and then kidnap the person, take them to the place, then kill them, clean up the body, clean up all of the plastic, clean up the crime scene, take all of the stuff, put it in his car, drive from wherever he is to the harbor, take everything from his car onto the boat, then drive probably like half an hour out to sea, dump everything, drive an hour back, park the boat, get in the car, drive home, and then also all of the secondary stuff like picking up all of the plastic sheets and bags that we mentioned earlier, organizing like shipments of his, M99 syringe. And yeah, most people can hardly hold down like a regular job and have a bit of social time in between, but he seems either incredibly efficient or something else, but he does a hell of a lot in just these 24 hours. Tier 4, Michael C. Hall stalking. So when he first secured the role of Dexter, and this was before filming had begun, Michael C. Hall said he actually went out, found or picked a random person, and just decided to stalk them. And he said it never went any further than that. He never actually did anything, but he just wanted to get a vibe, get a feel for how it was like to stalk someone, and more importantly, he said how easy it would be. And he said it was terrifyingly easy. Like, he stalked multiple people, no one ever saw him or suspected him, and this was probably his, method acting getting into the role of Dexter. Refrigerated Truck 1981. So this refers to Miami itself in 1981, and Miami, as you might know, was, especially back in the day, this crazy, insane high crime rate, high murder rate area, and this was especially back in the days of substance smuggling back in the 80s. And by 1981, Miami was actually responsible for 70% of the US's smuggled devil's lettuce and 70% of the smuggled devil's snow, as well as 90% of the smuggled quaaludes, or however you pronounce them. And as you can imagine, there was a ton of money in this, and so with money comes murder. And in 1981, there was actually so many bodies, so many murders, that the morgue actually filled up, and they weren't able to store any more bodies. So the city had to hire a refrigerated truck to store the bodies in, and they kept this truck until 1988 for this purpose. So this might have possibly been an inspiration for, the ice truck killer. Maybe, maybe not. It might have just been, the small little spark that started that idea, but I think it is quite an interesting one. The opening credits mosquito. Now, obviously, you all know and love the opening credits. Everyone does. It's just a masterpiece of cinema, quite honestly. But I did see this interesting idea bouncing around, where in the opening credits, Dexter only kills the mosquito only after the mosquito has bitten him and drawn blood. And this might represent how Dexter only kills people, after they have committed a crime, after they fit his code. And so he's waiting to kill so badly, probably sees the mosquito coming down. He's like, I want to kill you, little mosquito. But he kind of has to follow his code. The mosquito attacks first, draws blood, and then, and only then, Dexter can kill him. Now, I'm sure Dexter doesn't have a code for killing mosquitoes, but since the whole opening sequence is kind of like an analogy of his life, there's a possibility this might be as well. I mean, most likely it was just put in there because it looks pretty cool, but there you go. Dexter is a lost member of the Assassins. Is maybe one of the more far-fetched theories, but it basically says that Dexter is one of the descendants of an assassin from Assassin's Creed. And this would probably explain his eagle eye like intuition and his awareness when he's doing stuff like his day job, reading the crime scene, but also when he's out stalking people. And also he's super athletic, he's agile, he knows how to fight, and he seems to be pretty nifty at assassinating people. So is it likely? No. Is it believable? Also probably no. But is it a theory? Absolutely. Dexter in Australia. So this is a reference to this hilarious ad in 2008 that has Michael C. Hall sitting there in an airport, just minding his own business. This guy comes up to him and says, "Hey, aren't you Michael C. Hall? The actor in 6 Feet Under?" And Michael C. Hall says, Yes, I am. He asks what Michael is doing in Australia, and he says that he's going to Adelaide. And when asked why he's going to Adelaide, he says because Adelaide has actually more serial killers per capita than any other city in Australia. And then they're both kind of like, yeah, okay, bit awkward. And then the Dexter tagline shows, and this is basically an ad for the new seasons of Dexter. And because the guy in the airport was Michael C. Hall, like the guy recognized him and called him by name, so it's not like he's playing the role of Dexter, he's like playing the role of himself, which would imply that Michael C. Hall himself is also a serial killer. But the ad got very mixed reviews, as you might imagine, partly because it was so dark and macabre. It's a strange thing to be advertising on daytime television, but also because the people of Adelaide thought it gave them a bad name, like especially the tourism department. If you're like, yeah, this city is full of serial killers, don't think too many people are going to be going on holiday there. But it's a hilarious ad. It's like a minute long. I leave a link to it in the description below, so definitely check it out. Almost 1,000 is a reference to Deb, who you might have noticed swears a lot. But someone actually went in, carefully counted all the times she said fuck, and it came to a total of 996 times, which is a lot of fucking times. Fuck nugget. Slice of life crash. So while filming a scene on this magnificent boat, at some point in the series, Michael C. Hall actually ended up crashing the boat, and it wasn't a major crash, but it did cause like $8,000 in damages. And yeah, I don't think he had to pay for the damages himself. Insurance is a wonderful thing, but yeah, silly Dexter. Dexter: The Early Cuts. So this is an animated web series that is also canon, and this explores Dexter's early life kind of before the show starts, or before the TV series, and it explores really some of Dexter's early kills, some of his first kills, and each episode is only like a few minutes long. There's 3 seasons in total. There's between 6 and 12 episodes per season, so in total there's like 45 minutes to an hour total. So the whole 3 seasons kind of cover 1 episode of Dexter. So again, with the other media, definitely check this out if you want more Dexter, if you want some of the, early cuts, some of the early lore of Dexter and his story, and maybe if you want a bit of a change in format. Season 6 Blu-ray spoiler. So if you bought the Season 6 Blu-ray of Dexter and, you take it home, you put it into the Blu-ray player, and you're thinking, oh boy, I haven't seen Dexter Season 6 yet, this is gonna be fantastic. You would be treated to, before Dexter even plays, you would be treated to an advert for Showtime, which is the TV network that Dexter was shown on. And in this advert, it would, advertise all these cool shows you can get if you watch Showtime. And one of the shows that it showed was Dexter, and one of the scenes that it showed was basically one of the most important scenes in the series. And spoilers for those of you who haven't seen Season 6, but the scene was Deb walking in on Dexter basically killing Travis, and that scene massively spoils the entire season. So it's like, great, before Dexter has even started, we've just gone ahead and spoiled the entire season for you. And from what I can find, they did remove it in later iterations of this, but they still spoiled it for a hell of a lot of people. But I mean, honestly, who even watches stuff on Blu-ray anymore? Hurricane Laura. So that was the name of the hurricane from the last season of the series, and it is the one into which Deborah was thrown, and killed essentially, and the one that kind of killed Dexter. Now, as we know, he didn't really die, but firstly, everyone thought that he died, and secondly, he kind of died in a way because he had to go and start a new life. But interestingly enough, Laura is also the name of Dexter's mother, so it's like he was birthed by Laura, both in the sense of physically birthed by her, as well as, her death kind of turned him into who he is. And then also he was killed by Laura and started his new life through this hurricane. So I don't know if these, names were intentional. They probably were, because it's an easy thing to name, but I didn't really notice this on the first time watching through it. Dexter is death incarnate. So this theory says that Dexter himself is actually death, but only for killers. So when a normal person dies under, any circumstances, car crash, choking on a peanut, banging their head off a coffee mug or something, their soul or spirit or whatever will be taken by whatever version of death looks after them or looks over them, and we will get a scene kind of similar to Dexter's with any other person. So the concept for this one is that these killers that Dexter is killing, they're actually just killers that die in just, mundane ways. Maybe one gets a heart attack, maybe one gets shot, and then Dexter is actually just killing their soul rather than him actually capturing them, kidnapping them, and killing them physically. Now, do I think this is in any way possible in terms of the series? Probably absolutely not. But again, as with these more fun theories, I think it is definitely something to just sit around, theorize about, and have a little bit of fun with. Dexter theme original. So the composer for all of these themes in Dexter, or at least most of them, is a guy called Daniel Licht. And this main Dexter theme is actually a recycled theme from one of his earlier pieces. And that earlier piece appeared in a film called Necronomicon. And if you listen, it's basically the same theme. So just this piece of music that he made earlier on in his career, when they hired him to write the Dexter stuff, he was like, yeah, that piece was so good that I'm just gonna use it again. And it is very strange, honestly, to see the Dexter theme appear in anything other than Dexter. And it honestly makes it seem like a parody of a film or something. But yeah, go take a listen. I'll leave a link down below. Trinity Monologue. So in the scene where Trinity tracks Dexter down and then, sneaks into the police station, walks up to Dexter and then looks at his name tag and gives us the incredible line,
"Hello, Dexter Morgan."
Well, in that scene, in the original version of this scene, the Trinity Killer was supposed to do this monologue to himself, kind of like how Dexter does. And this was as he was walking around the police station looking at all of his evidence, the evidence that the police had on him, which he does do in the actual final cut, but he doesn't give a monologue. And for this one, honestly, a monologue might have been cool. It depends how they did it. It depends how it, ended up playing out. But we'll never get to experience it, so we will probably never know. Unless Lithgow does a voiceover that we can dub onto the scene, we can hope. The ending was intentionally bad. And oh boy, this is like the theory to end all theories. This says that the ending to Dexter, notably the original series, was so bad, but it was intentionally bad for the showrunners to make us feel like Dexter, in that by creating a horrible, terrible ending, it would all make us feel disappointed, empty, sad, and full of despair, just like Dexter feels all the time. So apparently the writers weren't terrible at writing. The ending was just like a meta weird commentary to give us the actual emotions that Dexter was feeling, playing like 4D mental chess with us or something. And yeah, I see. This theory is insane. Dexter on the run. So this is just a theory that says that Dexter at the end of the original series, that it would end with Dexter being on the run, which obviously that didn't happen. So then the theory changed to, okay, at the end of New Blood, maybe he goes on the run. But then, spoiler alert, 2-1, he didn't end up on the run. So then this theory changed to maybe at the end of Resurrection, he will end up on the run. And will that happen? We don't really know. Would it be cool to happen? I mean, probably. I think that's the easiest route to making a good ending. And it also leaves the door open for some like Old Man Logan type of stuff. A 70 or 80-year-old Michael C. Hall playing this old man Dexter. I think that would be pretty cool. But on this one, only time will tell. Dexter in Prison is a similar entry to the previous one that predicted that Dexter would eventually end up in prison, which is looking more and more likely after New Blood. But there's actually a few different versions to this one. So one says he ends up in prison, on death row maybe. Another says he ends up in prison and he maybe stops killing altogether, or that he continues his killing and he's got to do like kills and cover them up in a way where you can't actually cover up dead bodies in prison, but like he's got to secretly kill people in gang-like ways. So all of these people are dying all around the prison and nobody knows that he's killing them. They all think it's like gang hits or accidental deaths. And I think that would be honestly a pretty cool thing to watch. Kind of like a Dexter Prison Break sort of blend. And actually the Dexter on the Run would be kind of like a Dexter Prison Break Season 2 blend, which would also be very cool to watch. But again, only time will tell the direction that Dexter Resurrection ends up going in. One person a month. So that is on average how often Dexter kills someone. And as I said, there is some kind of inconsistency with this writing in the series, but he kills somewhere around 2 kills a month, which puts him anywhere from like 12 to 24 kills a year. And in 2023, Miami only logged 31 homicides, which means if he's killing 24 a year and there's 31 homicides, then Dexter's responsible for what, like 80+% of the killings in Miami. And granted, a lot of these killings would probably be classed under, disappearances, but that is still a lot of bodies to blend into Miami. Back in the 80s, as we mentioned earlier, this would be completely drowned out, registering 621 deaths in 1981, or even worse, 621 murders. But it seems like in this more civilized, enlightened time, Dexter probably wouldn't go as unnoticed. Harrison killed Hannah is a theory that says that in New Blood, when Harrison, comes and finds Dexter, it's actually because his first kill was Hannah. So maybe he hated her for whatever reason, she couldn't control him. He killed her either accidentally or on purpose. And then he goes to find Dexter. He does, plays out the rest of New Blood, and maybe we'll get this reveal in Dexter Resurrection. Probably not. I don't think it's too likely to be a true theory, but Harrison was an angry, violent young man who, had no control on his urges. He had no code, so it is always a possibility. Astor and Cody killers. So this one isn't actually a theory, but it is what happened in the Dexter book series, which is pretty messed up, but basically Astor and Cody end up developing a dark passenger of their own, and they turn into like little mini serial killer prodigies, and I think, in my opinion, it was probably the wrong move. I think keeping them as, innocent children is probably a good thing. Not everyone has to be a serial killer, but it is just one of the many ways that the Dexter book series is sometimes quite a bit different to the TV series. Barney's father is the Trinity killer. So this one is kind of funny. John Lithgow, the guy who plays the Trinity killer, also plays Barney's dad in How I Met Your Mother. And so this is like a headcanon kind of fan theory sort of thing that says that these two people are actually the same person, and that Barney's father, fathered him and then left, as he does in How I Met Your Mother. He's kind of unspoken of for quite a few years. And this theory says that in those few years where he's basically missing, he goes off, starts a new family, has a son, has a daughter, and basically lives this double life and does all of this serial killing. The role he plays in How I Met Your Mother is also kind of funny, because he plays this kind of lovable, kind of fun father figure sort of thing, but he also kind of plays that role in Dexter, when he's hiding his true self. So the whole How I Met Your Mother role also could be an act. So like, how many families does he have? How many years has he been doing this? Prowling around looking for victims, starring in different TV shows. It's perhaps one of my favorite fan theories, I think. Not incredibly likely, probably impossible, but still very, very fun. And if it's one thing we like on this channel, it is fun theories. And a massive shout out to John Lithgow. He is, as always, absolutely legend. Wait for it. Derry. Tier 6, real life Dexter. So Dexter, who we all know and love, was likely based on, at least in part, this Brazilian guy, Pedro Rodrigues Filho, who hunted down and killed an entire gang in Brazil because they had killed his pregnant girlfriend, which is kind of like Dexter mixed with John Wick. And this was actually when he was quite young, so he was 14 when he had his first kill. He shot the deputy mayor of Santa Rita do Sapucaí, and this was for firing his father and for basically corruption. And then he also shot a security guard, also he said for corruption. Then he went on the run. He started basically cleaning up the streets. He was taking out criminals, he was taking out substance shifters, shall we say. He was taking out traffickers, and then a rival gang found out about this. They came in, they killed his, as I said, pregnant girlfriend, and then he just went completely crazy on them. He hunted down and killed this entire gang, and by the end his kills numbered like 100+. And so he was arrested, he was brought in, and as he was being transported from place to place, he was locked in the back of a car with another inmate. And then they go from place to place, they stop the car, they open up the door, and this other prisoner just falls out of the car dead. And Pedro had basically killed this guy in the back of the car without any of the officers even noticing until they arrived at their destination. And he said that was because this other prisoner was in jail for assaulting women. And so once again, he saw it as he was just taking out the trash. He was sentenced to 126 years in prison, but he only ended up serving like 34 because Brazilian law actually limits how long you can spend in prison, which begs the question, why sentence someone to so long, if they can only spend a limited amount of time in prison anyway? Bit strange. But he was released in 2007 and then arrested again for separate charges. And then eventually, after being released, he was shot dead in a drive-by. And I'd say this case belongs on the Unsolved Mysteries Trinity Iceberg, because the 2 men who killed him were never caught, were never identified. But over 100 kills in just a few years on the run. This guy was seriously scary. Tops even Dexter's numbers. Mom, we have Dexter at home. Dexter at home. So this is a reference to this creep Mark Twitchell, who has just such a punchable face, honestly. It annoys me just looking at him. But he was a filmmaker, a writer, a director of sorts. Not a very successful one, clearly. But he, in 2011, lured in and killed a man named John Bryan Altinger. Now, Mark had already tried to lure in and kill another man, and he would make these fake profiles on this dating website, acting, as a woman, and then start talking to guys, start kind of smoozing them, and then say, hey, you should probably come over to my house. I've got an empty garage, I've got some plastic sheets that need, filling. And so these guys were like, yeah, all right, I'll come over. The first guy went into the garage and then was attacked by Mark. And Mark was wearing a ski mask, he had a stun baton, and he managed to injure this man, but he eventually did get away. And the sad thing about this is he didn't actually report this to the police because he said he was kind of embarrassed about it, but if he had done, it would have prevented the next case, which happened when Mark lured John over to the house. And John wasn't so lucky. Mark lured him into the garage, then he hit him over the head with a hammer, knocked him out, stabbed him to death, and Mark, being the moron that he is, tried to burn the body, which that failed. Then he cut up the body, put it into bags, dumped it in a storm sewer. And then I guess he thinks he's all slick. He breaks into John's home, goes into his emails, and just sends emails to John's work saying, yeah, I'm going on an extended holiday. See you probably never. And he sent a resignation letter to his work. Then he sent an email to John's friends saying that, yeah, I went on this date with this rich lady. Then she offered to take me to Costa Rica, which I'll be there for like super long. Don't even bother contacting me. I'm having the time of my life. And so because of all this, his friends thought that's pretty suspicious. They broke into John's home to try and get some evidence, and they found that he still had his passport there. He didn't seem to have packed anything. And so they were like, yeah, that's a bit strange. And they reported this to the police. The police started an investigation and soon found Mark in possession of John's car. And Mark's excuse was, yeah, John just kind of came by. I don't really know the guy, but he said, hey, I'm going to Costa Rica with this lovely, beautiful lady here. I don't need my car. If you want to buy the car for, whatever cash you have on hand, then you can go ahead and do that. And so Mark said he paid him like whatever loose change he had, a total of $40, he said, for John's car, which, yeah, absolutely believable. So police took Mark's laptop, they took the car, they found John's blood in the car, which is pretty damning evidence right there. And they also found a bunch of evidence on Mark's laptop. One file being named the SK Confessions, which stands for the Serial Killer Confessions, which was like this text file that was supposed to document kind of Mark's progression into becoming a serial killer. And he said he was a massive fan of Dexter. He kind of saw himself as Dexter, oh, I'm so cool, I'm so rugged and handsome, I can do jujitsu, fighting Shia LaBeouf, which just no. And I mean, that was basically it. Mark was charged and convicted of first-degree murder. He is currently serving 25 years to life. And if he wanted to be like Dexter, he should have, done the main thing that Dexter does, and that's kill other killers, not just innocent random people that he lures in on a dating website. But I don't think this guy was too intelligent in the first place. Dexter is a vampire is another fan theory that says that, well, Dexter is a vampire. He prowls around at night, he likes blood, and he seems to have kind of superhuman strength and speed and agility. Nothing like our old friend Edward over there, but still seems to be more skilled than the average person. And apparently vampires haven't always, frizzled up in daylight. There are some versions of vampires that are more like Superman in a way. Kryptonite only kind of weakens him, it doesn't really kill him. And so the theories are that in the daytime, Dexter is, weakened by the sun, but then when the moon comes out, Dexter has all of his agility, all of his strength powers, and once again, bit of a silly theory, but it is fun to ponder on for a little bit. Geas. So this is kind of an interesting take on Dexter and his code. And in Celtic mythology, a Geas was sort of like a compulsion or a curse or even a code. You know, it was sometimes this set of rules that you had to live by, and if you did, you were granted certain powers. So, you know, maybe like a warlock sort of thing, like a pact with a demon or a dark passenger. And so this might tie in with Dexter having to follow this code. And if he does strictly follow the code, he is blessed with super strength, heightened abilities, super perception abilities, maybe some deductive abilities. And so maybe from when he starts killing up until season 1, he's more or less followed this code completely, which has given him all of these abilities and he's able to not get caught. But slowly as he starts breaking the code kind of here and there, the image of Harry starts to crack a little bit. Maybe his powers also start to wane, so he gets a little more sloppy, messes up here and there, which leads to some of the events in later seasons. A very cool part of mythology, I think. I do personally love stuff like this, and it does make sense in a few ways. It's not entirely plausible, but it is a top headcanon / fan theory. And that is all we have time for. I hope you enjoyed this Dexter Iceberg. I hope you enjoy Dexter as a whole. If you haven't seen it and I've just ruined a bunch of things, terribly sorry. But definitely check out New Blood if you haven't already. Check out Original Sin, which is more or less just come out. And keep your eyes open for Dexter Resurrection, which should be a fascinating series. And obviously the Trinity Killer prequel, if that does come out. And obviously the early cuts, the webisodes, the comics, the video games, etc. And if you finished watching this, go check out one of my other videos. Tonight is the perfect night to binge watch them, and it's going to happen again and again. Has to happen. And as always, thanks for watching.